Okay, so we're open to questions. If you would just maybe stand when you ask a question, but we're having a little trouble, at least us old people, having a little trouble hearing some of the questions from the back of the room. And if you remember the names, address the person you'd like to answer your question.
I have a question for, well, it's kind of for everybody because I think you'll all have different perspectives on it. Obviously, we're in a position where some radical changes have to be made in the ways we live and how we use energy and what we eat and so on and so forth. But any change strategy is going to impact people because we live in a very inequitable society, right? And so any kind of transition we talk about is going to have justice implications. Obviously, the biggest justice implication is for future generations to come, so intergenerational justice is a huge question for me. But in terms of how we mitigate the social justice impacts of changing towards more sustainable ways of living, how do you consider those, and how can we approach those? And I'd like to just sort of tack on to that. Not tack on, but just give you the overarching idea that we need to take a decolonial approach to this also, because we do have obligations in Canada and British Columbia to comply with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So I guess the overarching question is, what do you consider to be the social justice implications of the kinds of changes we need to make, and how does one or all of you approach those?
John?
Well, I'll take a run at it. I feel like it's really hard to even consider intergenerational justice if your place is burning down. And so, honestly, I think to preserve a place where we can even explore that in a rational and calm way, we need a safe environment first. As inequitable as it may be right now, to keep it from burning down, at least creates an opening and holds a space to explore this, really crucial question that you're raising. But today, I've learned so much today, and had affirmed also what I learned in my own research about the ways that we have forgotten to look at the land and take care of the land, the ways we've forgotten to understand the land, from the very first speaker, this morning all the way through. There have been these guideposts raised for us and these ways forward. And I think all of them, frankly, work toward creating a space for working on this issue, which can be worked on simultaneously. Like, every day that this place doesn't burn down is another day that we can address these issues. The fact that you brought it up right now is because this place is still standing, and we're not running for our lives. And a whole lot of Canadians ran for their lives this summer and could not consider questions of justice of any generation. They're too busy saving their ass, and trying to find their cat or their kid or whatever it is. So this is all, in a way, how to address that is to address everything that people brought up today and act on it. And I really don't mean that as a way to shut you down at all. Like, what you're saying is like, this is where our civilization can go and has to go. But it has to go there not on fire.
Don't worry, you won't shut me down.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make that clear, that I'm not trying to put you off.
It's a really good point. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, Louise.
I want to thank everybody. I really enjoyed a lot. It was nice how it all came together. I guess another thing that's been...
Louise, stand up.
Oh, sorry.
Speak loud.
Things that have been on my mind are, the fact we're living under twin crises. It's not just climate change, but it's also biodiversity loss. And what worries me sometimes, as humans do, you know, they see the cause and then they go at it full throttle without looking at the entirety. So I guess what I would ask is, how do we, you know, fire smart our place without fire smarting all of the individuals, and by that I mean non-human individuals, that say depend on standing dead, right? So how do we take something like provincial parks that are there, you know, to try and make sure we don't lose all the biodiversity and not wipe it so that that we're actually making things worse, right? Anyway, that's something that's really been on my mind.
Yeah, and maybe if I could speak to that a little bit. Again, I think it's kind of understanding the ecosystems and how they function, and recognizing that what we see today might not be the optimal way these ecosystems have functioned historically, that created the biodiversity attached to this land that we think, that we value, that we associate with it. So biodiversity might be here in spite of the condition of the forests that we have created, that they're just hanging in there making the best of a bad situation. And I think in a lot of these dry ecosystems, what I have learned in the last 10 to 15 years working in these systems is that much of what we propose to do that would be ecological restoration to maintain those and enhance those habitats also then have the secondary benefit of fuels mitigation that would also benefit our human community. And so they don't always go hand in hand. Restoration and mitigation are not always the same thing, but in many of these dry ecosystems they can be. But I would also share your concern that if we do too much of the same thing everywhere and homogenize it in simply a different way, we could create problems as well. But I think there are win-win-wins with some change.
Just like to add to that, I think we're really good at looking at individual situations, figuring out the problem, and trying to solve a problem. And we're really poor at recognizing that human overshoot on the planet is the macro problem, and there's all these pieces of it that are driven by overshoot, whether it's consumption, our economy, our health system, our diet, food system, everything's connected. And even our organizations are siloed such that we talk about pieces, and it's really hard to put a group of people together who can look at the whole picture. And the whole picture is really hard to model, and it's really hard to understand, and it's even harder to problem solve. But we've created the problem in the macro. We can't solve it in the micro.
I'll just add one thing. Lori kind of touched on it, but it's kind of the idea, don't do the same thing everywhere. So in something like Halloween, you don't have to do the same fire smarting cleaning up everywhere. I mean, it might be okay if there's some more forceful debris in one area than another, right? As long as you're protecting, say, the interface. Did you hear me, or what do you think?
Can't hear you.
Sorry, just saying that don't do the same thing everywhere. That some parts of the park, for example, could have more coarse woody debris than other parts, maybe different densities in forests, things like that. So you're increasing the diversity of habitats, but which will help with the biodiversity. But and then as long as you're aware of what happens on the interface around there, you can still protect the houses.
And save all the big things. You know, save the big trees that are live and the big trees that are dead. It takes centuries to grow those back. Leave the big logs down on the ground. Everybody who's had a campfire, what do you start with? How do you start your campfire?
Kindling.
Kindling. Get rid of the kindling.
Yeah.
Keep the big logs, keep the big snags, keep the big trees. That big structure is what the biodiversity, it's, you know, the kindling. The small stuff is going to cycle through the system. It's going to grow back, it's going to die, it's going to decompose, it's going to cycle through. It's easy to replace. The big stuff is not. So even where you're doing your treatments, leave the big live trees, leave the big dead trees, leave the big logs down on the ground. They're not your big fire hazards. They're the ones that are going to give you that structural diversity at fine and large scales that will maintain those other aspects of the ecosystem that are essential to have, even as you become fire smart.
I have a question that follows right up on that. I have 13 acres of trees, and I've essentially done what you say about spreading out and keeping it bigger. There's stuff on the ground, and I'm in a debate with my family. I don't want it to look like Stanley Park. That is plant food down there. How much of it should be left? How much of it is kindling?
Great question.
Can you use the microphone, please?
I'll quickly just say, Kurt, the guy that's sitting right beside you, has a great answer for that. But I'll pass on to the rest of the group. You should talk to him afterwards, though. He's got a great project going on Salt Spring Island.
Do you want to say what it is?
Yeah. Do you want to come down and talk a little bit about your project?
Yeah.
I can probably yell for you.
No, you should come down. This is Eric.
Hi.
Good question, Kurt.
Yeah, I think it's on, isn't it? Yeah. Yep, it's on. Okay, so I'm working with a group called Transition Salt Spring, and we've got a climate adaptation research lab going there. We're working with Tara Martin from UBC, and working with Rain Coast Conservation Foundation. So we're trying to do some ecological thinning in the watershed of Mount Maxwell. So to reduce the fire risk, do some fire smarting. We're also taking those branches you mentioned, and what we're doing is and the larger logs, we're taking them and we're making what we're calling assembled nurse logs. So this is a person who developed this in Merville. His name is Tal Engel. So he came up with this. So instead of we don't have those big logs that Lori mentioned there. So we're taking smaller trees and logs and putting together, making a bigger assembled nurse log, putting some of the branches on them, and then putting wood chips on them. We're also cutting slits in the logs to let water through. So even in this past year with those new slits in there, there's already fungi starting to populate those little areas. So what we're doing is we're trying to make those into moisture centers that are also providing some shade, to provide some habitats, like there'll be habitat piles as well. And then with these different piles, if you sort of disperse the piles across your site, you can disconnect the fuel so it's not just a sea of small branches, because the chances of one of those piles getting on fire and then being able to shoot an ember to another pile to keep it going is sort of astronomical. So if you're spreading out the fuel, you're creating some habitat piles, and then if you create these assembled nurse logs, you're getting the bigger logs that Lori was talking about, because we need that big coarse wooded debris to be nutrient inputters, moisture sponges, and those kinds of things. So that's some of the kind of highlights that we're trying to do there, and then to do multiple objective thinning so we can move along old growth development, create some habitat, increase carbon storage, moisture, maintain the forest cover so you've got moisture, cool, shady conditions, which will help put out the fires or keep them, that they don't get super intense, that they'll stay as surface fires, and then pruning the ladder, the branches from the ladder fuel so that they won't climb up into the crown. But doing it from an ecological lens, and then getting landowners have lots of options that they can plug into, so that everybody might want to do or manage their land differently. So some people are loggers and want to do that, and some people are more conservationists. So we'll give them broad objectives that they can plug into and do that. And also we want to bring along sort of the loggers and the foresters too, because we need their skills and smarts to do this harder to do thinning, because it's going to be more expensive and it's trickier to do in the standing timber. So we want to make sure that we're using their skills and help us to do a more ecological forestry that's harder to do because it's more expensive and it's a lot trickier to do as well. That's sort of the quick highlights of it.
Thank you.
I'd just like to maybe share a little bit with you what I've taken away from the last 2 days. And this is what, walking around this summer with the little dog we have, walking around the Lee Smith Trail, what scared me the most was walking on kindling. I could feel under my feet when the little guy and I walked off the trail, it went crunch, crunch, crunch. Now I walk up there and it goes smoosh, smoosh, smoosh. I feel safe again. But what's going to happen next summer, I learned from the people today and the people last night, it's going to be crunchier. So what am I going to do? What I took away from the macro level is I'm going to consider buying a family electric vehicle. Not just for me and my wife, but if one of the kids wants to go somewhere, or they can use it better in Victoria, wherever, not just, or even the neighbor needs to borrow it to go somewhere. Deal with it that way. You know, because I can't rationalize spending the money for an EV just for Carol and I. Can't do that. Can I do it for our little community? Maybe I can. So I'm going to really think about that. I'm going to look at solar. Maybe I could put, because the guy Dave Neats down on Gabriel Island, who's really big on solar stuff, he looked at our house and said, he looked at how our house is pointed and said it's perfect. It faces southwest. I could put solar on there, maybe get solar for our house and the next door house and the little cabin next door. Maybe I can do that. I'm going to look at that very carefully. But what I'm also going to do about the crunch, crunch, crunch thing is I'm going to put my rain gear on this winter and I'm going to crawl around with the baby chainsaw we have, which unfortunately isn't battery driven. I'm going to get down and clear everything within 100 feet of our house. So that what really got me, Doug, partly was that tree in, it's the sparks. I didn't really understand it that clearly, you know. So anyway, that's not a question, that's an observation. And I really appreciated what everybody said today up here.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I'd like to take us further on the macro level if we could. And I just know from a group I'm associated with, World Beyond War, that the #1 environmental polluter in the entire world is the U.S. military. And what I do not understand is why we Canadians aren't in a complete uproar about our buy-in for NATO and by extension the U.S. military and the wars that we are helping and we are complicit in this world. And I'm wondering if any of you could comment on militarism and perhaps source of funding for environmental, whatever kind of repair we might do. And do you have any insights that you might share to help us wake up our other Canadians to take a stand on this? Sorry.
She's absolutely not sorry.
You did a great job.
Questions.
Up on the back there?
I just have an experience to share. I grew up in California, and I grew up in the oaks and the grasslands, and I spent a lot of my youth up on my roof with a hose, wetting down cedar shingle, or it was redwoods in California, redwood roof. And recently, because of the fires in California, I got faced with mitigation, and that came as a letter from my insurance company saying, you must, get rid of all these things. And then the fire department coming along and saying, you must get rid of all this. And I had grown up with, 60 years of junipers and Alberta spruce, and these trees were trees that, I played on and hit on. It was absolutely devastating for me. But in the idea of kind of social justice, or just having to do what you have to do, I finally had to accept, having my whole front yard and part of my backyard looked like a bomb went off, just wiped out. Like all those trees had to come down. I was traumatized for like 3 or 4 weeks when I saw it. And I just had to, I had to make that decision from the point of view of, being in that neighborhood, but also just the fact that the fire department, and you would get this, Doug, basically just said, you can leave those trees, but we will not fight a fire. We will not save your house because those are torches going to kill our firemen. And when he said that, I was terrified. I went, well, yeah, just take them all out then. I have not done I haven't put back anything yet. I'm going down this year to face that, and I'm just terrified to go down there and kind of go, how do I replace, how do I do all this? So I think it's really hit home what all you were saying. And there's no fire that's come through that area where I live, but it could. So just as a person in that community, I just had to make that choice, and it wasn't easy. And I think that's what we're all going to be faced with that. We have trees that we love in our front yards, that the birds are in, and we're going to have to say goodbye to those on some level and make peace with that. And it's not easy, but I think it has to be done. And so to anybody out there that's going, I don't want to take that tree down, you have to think about this for everybody, and especially on this little island, So I just wanted to share that, and really thank you for bringing this again home. We know it, some of us know it, and we've known it, and it just is one of those things that we go, I don't want to deal with that. And to be forced to deal with it by the fire department saying to me, we will not save your home, was just like, okay, I guess I have to do this. So it's a big deal. Anyway, thank you.
Doug, would you like to?
I'll let Lori go.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I want to say thank you for making a personal sacrifice for the benefit of your neighborhood.
Thank you. We're retreating for listening to all this.
And that's a little bit of what has to happen. There have to be some short-term and personal sacrifices that have to be made. And I will, not every tree in your neighborhood has to come down. There's lots of communities that I've worked with in BC where, in fact, people have gone out. The first thing they've done is prioritize what values do you want to keep? Which trees in your neighborhood, in your yard, are most important? Put a flag around them. Now make your plan to save your home and those values in your yard. And my guess is we have enough creativity amongst us. And in the solutions, enough flexibility in the solutions, with some really creative solutions available to us, that we can be safe and still have elements that are most important to us. There are lots of trees on this island that can stay. There's lots of diversity that can happen on the forest, but some change is necessary to improve the safety for many people across the community. And I'll also comment, both from collaborating with people in the United States and many communities in the interior of BC, I have received many phone calls, emails, and questions from the media about the fact that insurance is either skyrocketing in cost or no longer available to British Columbians because they live within 25 or 50 kilometers of a wildfire this summer. And when you think of the amount of area that has burned in this province since 2017, the majority of communities, many communities, are within 50 kilometers of a fire that has burned in the last decade, which has consequence for each and every one of us trying to insure our homes. And so some of this might come to us not as a carrot, but as a stick. And so the sooner we can act, the better off we'll be collectively as well.
During Lori's talk, she talked about how firefighters and structure protection specialists were spending an inordinate amount of time moving wood piles and moving shovels and rakes and plastic things away from houses. The cold, stark reality is this: if we show up at someone's house to do a structure protection setup, and there is cedar trees hanging over the roof, and it's a cedar shake roof, and the yard is covered with tall grass, and the homeowner has not really put much time and effort into it, It's going to take us 3 hours to look after, to do some sort of basic protection on that house. In that amount of time, we can go to the neighborhood on Giroux Road and do 7 houses. We'll make that decision every day, all day. We'll take that. And the house that has had no effort put into it will get a red tag on the driveway, and we won't go there because we can save so much more. There's a very limited amount of time. You know, maybe when we do the rest of the neighborhood, we'll go back and we'll look at those places. But it sounds a bit like a threat, like the stick to fire smart your place, call the fire department, get an assessment happening. But that really is the cold reality of it.
Can I ask a question? How many people in the room have a child or a grandchild who's between the ages of 18 and 30? So that's the age class of our wildland firefighters in British Columbia. So the majority of our staff are summer students. They're part-time employees who spend their summers defending homes and communities and ecosystems around our province. But on many occasions in the wildland-urban interface, they're also defending homes. And if they're defending homes and properties where people have taken 0 steps to make that job easier, we're asking those young people to put their lives on the line to defend a material property that could be replaced. And we ask them to do it under exceptional conditions, when it's hot, when it's windy, when they're exhausted because they have been doing this for day in and day out. Think of the quote from the fire chief from West Kelowna. You saw the images of the West Kelowna, of the McDougall Creek fire burning during a cold front with winds pushing that fire down the mountain to the edge of the lake at rates that are mind-boggling to me, who studies fire behavior and fire effects. And the fire chief described he fought 100 fires in one night, and they're heartbroken because they lost 80 homes. And those are the conditions under which those young people are defending
Intergenerational justice.
So here's where all of us, again, if we work together, we can make the choices for not just me. We can make the changes that were described to alter our homes and properties to our own benefit for those in our neighborhood and to the people who ask to work to defend our properties under these extreme emergency situations.
Yes, in the back there.
I'm not from here. I'm from the interior. I have a home in Shuswap. Everyone in this room, do the work. Do it now, or you will lose your house. I am a survivor. I did not lose my house. I worked my ass off for the last 2 summers, clearing stuff out. Get rid of your cedar hedges. They're not normal. That isn't what you need here. I see them in the Okanagan all the time. They are water sucks and they are candles. Get rid of your wooden fence. Do the work. You want social justice? Do the work. It's our responsibility, not the next generation. Stop telling millennials they're the problem. We are the ones who have benefited all this time. It's now time. We do the writing of the letters. We do the cutting down of all the ladder fuels. Take responsibility and do the work. Do it together. It takes less time for 5 people to work on your neighbor's property and get it all done in a 2-day or 3-day period. Then the group moves to the next property. Do it together. It's fun when you do it together.
Man, I like the way you did it.
Thank you guys for all.
Okay, Louise?
We're building the new art center, just up there, and around it is this green belt of 8 acres of crown land that we have, that we're trying to clear the dead trees out and everything else, and have been doing it by this long process of applying for money to build a trail, to take out, some of the dead wood and everything else. And I'm just wondering, is there not a quicker way to look at it? Because this is the green belt between us and Joe King and, other structures. And, like she said, maybe there's a way we can all do it together, go in there and clear out this 8 acres so it's a safe place and not full of kindling and dead trees.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Work hard.
It's that bit of land is high value as far as community infrastructure goes. So you and I get together, we'll talk to the CBRD Fire Smart Committee, and we'll see if we can get some money from the government to do some fuel mitigation.
I think that's a great idea, and I do want to recognize that we have Daniel Harbour sitting in this afternoon, our CBRD representative. I'm sure you're listening very closely, Daniel. Thank you. Other questions? Peter.
One of the things, I'm sure in the back of people's minds too, is when you start taking down trees, you start removing carbon capture. So how do you reconcile those opposing values? You want to make it fire safe, but we also want to keep removing carbon.
Yeah, great question. So we're counting, trees obviously. There we go. So when trees photosynthesize, they're taking carbon out of the atmosphere, they're capturing and storing it in their stems and needles and roots and the like. And then when we remove trees, when we cut them down, of course, we lose both the opportunity to capture carbon into the future, but also to be storing it because we've now cut that down and removed it. And so here's something that might seem counterintuitive, but remember that a small number of trees in a large area, there'll be abundant resources and those trees will grow large and continue to grow large, and their growth rate will be maintained, and they will continue to take carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in their tissues as they grow larger and larger. When we have a high density, when we have hundreds to thousands of trees, and think of those dog-hair thickets where there's hundreds of small trees densely packed in the understory, and they have just a few green needles on the top. They can sustain some photosynthesis, but they're not accumulating and storing a lot of carbon. Our tree ring studies, I was shocked to discover that in the dry forests in the East Kootenays of BC, there are trees in the understory where there's hundreds of trees in the understory that have not produced a tree ring since the early 2000s. They have green needles, they are this big around and 90 years old. Whoa. And they can't photosynthesize enough to create enough carbon to add a ring to the trunk of the tree every year because they're so densely packed, because they're competing with each other and the big trees above them, and because it's hot and dry in the summertime and they're stressed. The worst part of this story is there's so many of those little trees and their roots sit on the surface of the soil that when it rains, the water doesn't make it deep down into the soil to the tap roots of the canopy trees. So the small trees are sucking up the water but not getting enough to be able to grow and produce a ring. But they're also competing with the big trees and taking the water, which would sustain the big trees. And so the big trees are also in decline and their rings are getting narrower and narrower and narrower because of drought stress. And if you cut out those understory trees and take away that competition, you can actually allow those big trees to start growing wings again. So there's a trade-off, again, counterintuitive, but thinning out those ladder fuels that were causing the stress to the big trees reduces the fuels in the forest, increases the survivorship of the trees in case of fire, increases their carbon sequestration and storage in the short and long term, and actually enhanced wildlife, gave opportunities for the understory to regenerate. There are win-wins. Wins.
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say something quickly. What you've just suggested is what I've been trying to do on my property. I just have a half acre, and it was raw land when I purchased it. And I looked at the land and walked the land, and I can feel, I'm an energy person, so I could feel where the low points were in the land. So I bought some rose quartz crystals and threw it around the land to bring all the energy up so it was equal. And then I lived there for a little while and lived in a little trailer the first winter and looked at my trees, and there was some trees that were where the branches were coming down quite quickly and creating the kindling. And I discovered those were balsam trees. And those balsam trees were also the ones that break off very quickly at the top and create more kindling on the ground. So I went through and I selectively got my son helped me, and fell all of the balsam trees around in my half acre. And then I cleaned out all of the debris, all the kindling, all the broken branches out of the bottom of the trees. After that was done, we had a huge fire there for a couple of years. Our fire seasons weren't so restricted then, so I could do the burning. And then I went through and took out all of the ferns that turned brown, all of the tall ferns that turn brown, because they're a real fire hazard in the summertime. And I also spiraled all of my fir trees. By spiraling them, I hired somebody to come in, and they took out every other branch sort of thing, so the tree would sway more easily in the wind. And I got them to cut off all the bottom branches of the fir trees. And we just do that with all of the trees. And I can't tell the difference between the balsam and the firs and the hemlocks when they're small, but I know somebody that will help me with that, so I can take out the small ones in the very beginning. But I don't want my place to become really thick with trees, because I'm hearing that was a good decision to make. So just to do a little bit of maintenance, and I got I've hired somebody to come in and help me to do that again this year. But I try to do a little bit more every year. And this next summer, I'm hoping to get solar energy put in on my house. And I also built both of my houses with a heavy-duty metal roof, which helps to, and I also make sure that all the debris is taken away from the drip line around my house. And I try not to plant anything too close to the house to keep that drip line free, and put fresh gravel down so that it doesn't gather up any other fire starter things that you just have a hard time keeping on top of. But I found that the spiraling of the trees and taking out the balsam have saved me a lot of debris from falling on the ground. So thank you.
I got a couple of questions, well, a couple of comments and then a question. So I was mentioning earlier, but so John and Rick, that I saw OPEC's General Secretary a couple of weeks ago on BBC saying in the next 10 years, they're going to be pumping in $14 trillion investment into new oil and gas. 14 trillion. So it's going to cost, the costs are going to be in the trillions, and it's going to be costing us hundreds and hundreds of trillions to counteract that 14 trillion of new investment. That's sort of one thing. But this whole restoration stuff that we're involved with, it's going to cost us millions and billions to do this restoration, but it'll actually save us billions and trillions, right? Not doing all that growth they're trying to slow down by letting our ecosystems grow over, etc. But I also have another comment too about sort of the First Nations traditional ecological knowledge, is that we're in the big data era. We need more data, so why wouldn't we go back, 14,000 years and pull in the traditional ecological knowledge that is so long-term for us? Lori mentioned those historic surveys. Well, that gets us back what we've done in colonial times for the last 180 years. And I think for tree rings and that sort of historical data, as I think you might remember that I'm interested in that historical data, that there's so many pieces that can be pulled together. So if we build on these big knowledge bases, the old growth forests of those ecosystems are a big knowledge base. First Nations tradition, equal knowledge, another knowledge base, and whatever colonial information we can pull together, we can pile this together and start asking questions of what have we done to these ecosystems in the last 180 years. So, but in some of that kind of knowledge stuff too, like Dell was mentioning about Douglas fir and down in California and stuff, is that some of the understanding down there is that in California, Douglas fir likes north-facing slopes that are cooler and moister, as opposed to up here, Douglas fir like the drier and southern-facing slopes. So I think there's some adaptation knowledge there that I'm sure that Dell is using with the biogenic zone stuff. But I think there's just huge opportunities that we ought to be working together and bringing our knowledge together and working where we're still in our sort of separate towers. We have to pile everybody together. So that's my hope too, is that with our fire fighting operations, we can engage landowners, and this knowledge that is built, that all of us has local knowledge, that we can bring that all together, that I'm hoping that we can start working together instead of being in our sort of separate towers, and sticking with the status quo, because that's not going to get us anywhere. That's sort of, I guess, more comment than question, but I'm just hoping that everybody continues on with this work and we can collaborate across many places and many ecosystems.
Okay, thank you for that, Eric. Don.
So just listening to all this, I was thinking about home insurance or insurance policy. You cannot get a mortgage with that if you don't have insurance. Now, that might be a catalyst for this, all this talk, really, because you can't get, it's going to affect a lot of property owners in BC for sure. So it might be a good thing, as far as not getting a mortgage, that'll force people to go the other direction, get things done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions? Louise. Let's call this the last question.
John, what's the next steps for us here? Like, who's gonna, I mean, there's a lot of will in this room, and there's probably a lot of will in the community to move forward, but we need to figure out how it's gonna happen. And just sort of putting that out, without saying that Conservancy has to carry it on his shoulder, but, does it go to CAS? Does it, like how do we take this next step and make it happen?
Yeah, that's the big question that I think a number of us are leaving today with. I think it begs us to have another session where we talk about what the art of the possible here on Hornby Island. How can we better organize ourselves to address not only the forest around the new art center, but all of the neighborhoods, identifying risks, coming up with potential solutions for those, as well as a whole bunch of other issues we're going to be dealing with because of climate change. So we've talked informally about hosting another workshop. We don't have any plans yet, but we'd like to hear from the community if there's enough people with the interest in actually having those serious discussions and start planning as a community for the future. So I'm sure our board will be having more discussions about that at our next meeting. And also we're open to input, of course, from yourself and other members of the community, Doug, and maybe a number of the organizations in the community can get together and kick this around. I know that there's at least one of these guest speakers that challenged us the other day, Rick, that it's up to us now, and I think he's absolutely right. So now it's just a matter of how us get our heads together and start putting plans and putting those plans into action. Rick, do you have any further comment you want to make? All of that. Well, I'll put a question to you. So you've worked with other communities in southern Vancouver Island. Can you give us an example of what other communities may have done in this regard?
Everybody's thinking, planning, and trying to figure out how to sneak up on this problem. And the problem is running away at 100 miles an hour. we seem to be just paralyzed in terms of our ability to be bold. And what is frustrating to me is it seems like we were bolder 50 years ago to try and tackle some things that really mattered. I don't have a good example of anybody who's truly being bold to step forward into radical action, because that's what's required. And I would encourage you to figure out if you have the courage to do that, because it's going to take courage. It's easy to talk about change. It's easy to talk about reducing fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are the economy. They drive the economy. Getting rid of fossil fuels is a massive project. Just look around your homes and think about what you'd do if gas was $10 a liter and an airplane ticket to California was a couple of $1,000s. It's very daunting. So I suggest you start local and try and be bold and use the wisdom of the people who have tried to provide some guidance in terms of fire and the immediate threats. Be prioritizing the immediate threats. Their fire here, their drought, their water availability. Be clear on what really matters to you right now. Don't let your community get scattered and take on 100 different projects. Figure out which ones matter, which ones are your real risks, and put all your energy together into trying to address those real risks.
Great comment. Thank you for that, Rick. It's right on. And John,
Well, I was just going to say that one example of real boldness was what this woman was from Shuswap was describing. That's really bold. You know, what you said to me, I live in Vancouver, but was totally bracing and totally challenging in the best way. Similar to what the woman from California said. You know, it's like, it's real, it's right now, these are serious consequences, this is not theoretical, it's not in the future, and that's this extraordinary moment of acceleration we're in. 2023 is, it's now, it's on, and you lived that this summer, and I'm so glad that you're here safely to tell us about it. And I think we should all be really grateful that, and that's why I wrote Fire Weather. Those folks back in 2016 in Fort McMurray, these are really humble people who work in the oil industry, but they were messengers from the future, from a very near future, and that's why I wrote the book, because they were here to tell me how it's gonna be. And it may not be that for all of us, but you didn't think it was going to be like that for you in 2016, and suddenly it was. And there's probably other people in this room who things happened to them since 2016 that they didn't think were going to happen, and now it's happening. And so these are equally possible realities for all of us to act with that kind of urgency and presence and community and solidarity. You know, it's so powerful, it's so radical. And we can really change the future that way. And it's, you know, super exciting. So thank you again for coming here. You know, we're a long way from the Shuswap.
I came for the food.
Yeah. And it really doesn't matter why you came, the fact you did with your message.
And thank you also to Eric for the boldness and the ingenuity of the people in Salt Spring.
It's not me though, it's a lady named Dr. Ruth Waldick. So she's leading the charge, and she's not taking any prisoners and kicking ass and knocking down doors, so, and getting funding and collaborating. So, I'm one of the followers, the lift ruckers, and here, what can we do this?
Yes.
I'd like to just segue on the word food. I really wanted to acknowledge the people who made the decision to have some plant-based options available for lunch today. When we're talking about our individual choices and how they affect the global whole, I'll tell you that we didn't enjoy your delicious chili. We were prepared to come back and buy some, take it home if you had any leftovers. But we brought our own lunch because we're so used to showing up on Hornby and not having anything to eat. So I think this is one of the things we need to bear in mind. We're talking about what are the solutions. Every single day, those of us with the privilege of choice have choices that we can make. And, we have some, and we're talking about social justice, that's connected to privilege. I think we not only talk about multi-generational privilege, but multi-species engagement. And I think we've heard from everyone on this panel today, the complexity of our ecosystems. We didn't see enough of the animals running from the flames. We didn't see the cow carcasses lying in the fields. We didn't see the deer fleeing for their lives and out in the water trying to stay alive. But we're all connected together as one whole. We are animals. We are human animals. So I was really appreciative that I didn't have to watch other people eating the fellow kin that I spend most of my life trying to raise awareness about. The connection to global climate change, the connection to water use. So I think, let's just remember, we're talking about Hornby Island today and these Gulf Islands. There's also the Amazon on fire. And the leading cause of deforestation around the world is animal agribusiness. So we have to make all of these connections, and we have to see where we fit into that big picture. So next year I'd like to come and know that it's completely inclusive and all the food is plant-based because we can all enjoy it together, and we can leave the cows alone, and we can practice what we preach together because we have the privilege of doing so. Amen.
Okay, I think we'll leave you with the last word. I see a lot of tired faces around the room, but just before we start moving, thank you again to our speakers. You were fantastic. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank some other people. First of all, our Executive Director, Bree Pearson, who's been working literally night and day for quite a while now to keep us all organized here and make sure we had the food, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the other board members. This is definitely a team enterprise. All the board members. We have a number of volunteers working in the kitchen and in the hall here that just showed up because they were friends or family members in the case of Bree, and pitching in, washing dishes, preparing food, et cetera, et cetera. So a big thank you to all the volunteers. Bree, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Hello again. Oops. Again, thank you so much. I echo all of Dawn's sentiments. Thanks to everybody who made this event possible. Give yourselves a round of applause for taking the time to come out and educate yourself about all these very important issues. And hopefully you'll leave here feeling inspired. I know it's a lot of heavy information, but I really thank all the speakers for giving everyone hope and suggesting helpful ways that they can go back out into the world and make a difference. So I hope that you'll share the knowledge far and wide, and thanks to Dale DeVos again for doing this on such short notice. I'm going to take a week off after this and turn my phone off, but after that I'm going to edit the footage and we'll put it online so you can share the information. And thank you so much, everybody. So thank you for being here. And the board, I think, do we still have, we have Margot and Dawn here. Kath had to leave, unfortunately. Joanne, is she in the audience somewhere? Joanne's over there, and Kristen's hiding there. We just really wanted to show our appreciation for all of you incredible speakers for coming all the way to Little Hornby Island. I know it was a hard, long drive for Doug on the bike. But it means a lot that you took your time out of your, we know you're all very busy, and you've inspired everyone immensely. So thank you so very much for being here. We have tokens of our appreciation here. I'm just realizing we gave Grant his present earlier, so please don't feel offended. I have something else for you here, but don't think we're singling out Grant. But yes, thanks to everybody. I'm going to pass these out, and just before we go, I should have done that last, but if anybody is leaving and they want to get any more treats before they go, we've got extra desserts for later, so feel free to stop by and grab a sandwich or something to take with you. But anyways, I should have saved that for last, but thank you so much for being here. We've got this, I'll pass it out, and I hope to see you all again in the future, and hopefully we can all stay in connection, and we can, if we do something with the community, I think really in person is great, but maybe having some sort of a Zoom thing to be able to spread the knowledge and have people interact off island who do have dwellings here would be a really great idea. So that would be great. But thank you, everybody. Please give them all a round of applause. I don't know what I'm doing, actually. I feel like this was a weird way of doing it.